Good afternoon, good morning. It's still morning. It's Thursday. I'm really jumping ahead. It's Thursday, April 17th, 2025 at 10 a.m. This is the House Appropriations Committee, and we are continuing to hear about federal funding from different agencies. And right now, we're delighted to have Jana Morse, the Director of Finance and Administration at the Agency of Transportation, come talk to us about what's happening in the transportation world. So Jana, welcome. If you would introduce yourself for the record and talk to us about your agency.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jana Morse, and I'm the Director of Finance and Administration at the Agency of Transportation. And I am here to talk with you a little bit about our federal funding status, which is great. You know, we have access to all of our federal funds, and we have no concerns. But I will jump to some of the rest of the slides.
I have been hearing this, and things have been sort of up and down, but now it seems to be good news. So
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So do walk us through your presentation.
Great. So this slide might look a little bit familiar to some of you. This was part of the Secretary's budget presentation and is typical for what we see every year. The Agency of Transportation receives funds from the U.S. Department of Transportation and its modal administrations like Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, Rail, Aviation Administrations, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. You can see those on the left side of the screen in the big green. 44% is federal highways, and another 7% of our total revenue sources or budget, it comes from our other federal funds. This funding is appropriated through a 5-year bill at the congressional level, and the current one is called the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This 5-year authorization provides estimates for formula funds for each of the years. So on an annual basis, we have a predication of what we're intending to receive. And the current authorization is for 22 through 26 federal years, expiring September 30 of 2026. So before we walk through the next few slides, in the memo that we received, you had requested some information about positions. So you'll see in the future slides that we report 0 in the positions column because we do not tie positions to our federal sources. Rather, we pay for the positions with state funds and then request reimbursement for eligible charges.
So do you have FTEs as opposed to positions that you could equate it to? People doing federal work and getting paid by the government for part of their.
Well, they're getting paid through the state funds and then we request reimbursement. So they're not tied directly to any of our federal grants.
So if you don't get a federal grant that you can be reimbursed for, then what happens to those people?
They still get paid with the state funds.
You just don't get reimbursed.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Go
ahead, Jim.
But that begs the question, what happens to your budget? I mean, something's got to give if
Right.
we're counting on reimbursement.
So we build our capital program with that in mind, and the most of our funds are formula funds. So they're guaranteed with the approval at the congressional level of that 5-year authorization. Thank you.
I'm going to digest this a little bit.
I think
It's a zero-sum game unless you're going to run a deficit.
I think it'll make sense as we walk through the next couple of slides on the formula versus competitive, and that I think it'll become clear. So we also, sorry, I think you might have a question before I.
Are we a de minimis state in terms of, in any sense, for federal funding? In other words, you know what that means? For federal funds, some states are so small that they get more money than what another state would based on the population.
I'm not sure about the answer to that, but I can get back to you. Thank you.
So what small state grants?
Well, some states like say Fish and Wildlife, you get Fish and Wildlife gets money from Pittman Robertson, 2 different federal sources. Their excise tax on products made in the United States, and every state gets a share of that money. But Vermont's a de minimis, a very small state, so the formula would give us not very much money. So we get more than what any other state would proportion.
You get a minimum small state neutral.
I'll certainly find out the answer to that thing. And so I will share also that we did receive at request 26 limited service positions that were associated specifically with the work tied to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So those were approved in the summer of 2022. and they've been carried forward in our budget through 2025. You'll see in our governor's recommend 2026 budget that we reduced that to 24 positions. We identified work that was no longer needed to continue, and the workload had diminished. So we were able to not fund 2 of those positions. They were vacant, so there were no persons impacted. And we just simply reduced the funding associated with the limited service positions tied to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So I'll move to the next slide. So for Federal Highway Administration, again, this ties to 44% of our budget. And if we're looking at just the federal funds portion of our budget, it's about 86% of the federal funds that we receive. So the Highway Research and Development Program, Highway Planning and Construction Program, Highway Training and Education, the Rec Trails Program, and Federal Lands Access Program all support the appropriations of DMV, Finance and Administration, our rest areas, policy planning, and intermodal development, environmental policy, maintenance, public trails, rails, town highways. And I could keep reading the long list that's on the screen in front of you, but essentially, these are some of our core programs that feed the appropriations of basically the entire agency. These are all formula funds. They are appropriated through the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, and we draw them down on an annual basis. So these funds are not at risk.
So the IIJA, I thought I heard one was at this point. I feel that it's not at this point.
They're formula core highway programs. There's no concern receiving these funds. So the next one is Federal Transit Authority, and we receive monies again through the Department of Transportation, and some of these come from FTA. There's several grants listed on the screen here. The splits for these are a little bit different depending on how they're utilized. So operations, administration, maintenance and planning, capital and low no emissions, and Vermont administration for our staff to receive reimbursement all receive a different percentage of state match required. So it varies depending on the grant, and the recipients of most of these grants are the public transit agencies around the state.
And that's a lot of funding we get for public transit.
Yes.
Realize it was so much.
Yeah. And again, this is mostly formula funds with the exception of the one competitive grant that we received. And the formula funds are not considered to be at risk.
So they're formula to the state of Vermont, and then how do you divvy it up to the various transit? Is there some sort of proportional formula?
Some of them are formula and some, like, they have to request and respond to a statement of work. And I'm not familiar with the inner workings of the specific distribution processes, but if that's something of interest, we can follow up.
If you need it. Great.
So now National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, these programs, the NHTSA programs, are both competitive and formula. Sometimes there are grants that you can apply for, and then sometimes you also just receive the base formula for what you would receive for community and highway safety. There are quite a few subrecipients for these, and it's an application process through the Operations and Safety Bureau within the agency. Would you like me to pause for a moment?
I don't think we need to.
No, it's not.
No, I have a question. That's okay, Madam Chair.
Please.
So these competitive grants, are they, because they're competitive, at risk?
No.
To your mind?
They're not. No. So the next slide covers Federal Rail Administration and Aviation. So for rail, the rail program does not have dedicated formula funds. So the program applies for competitive grants issued by the Federal Rail Administration, including the Railroad Development and CRISI grants, as well as National Infrastructure Investment to deliver the rail program. So while this could be perceived as creating some instability, the team has been successful with securing adequate funding to advance their program goals. Yes.
Amtrak. We have two major routes. The state, I believe, subsidizes part of that.
Mhm.
say a big cart comes from Amtrak to make those routes viable. Are we worried about Amtrak subsidies going forward?
We have not received any cause for concern with the Amtrak subsidies going forward.
I read about some, of course.
No, I mean,
Right.
a lot of this is all speculation, but
Not that I'm aware
that no news is good news, so I just, I can appreciate, I mean, just like we've heard with the postal service that, you know, move the money or, I don't know that Amtrak is profitable and, you know, overall, and impact that might have. Yes. Okay.
of. That's a question. So for aviation, the variation for here is typically the airport improvement program is not eligible for staff to be reimbursed out of. So those staff are entirely paid for with other funds and would not seek reimbursement towards this particular grant. So I'll move to Motor Carrier Association.
We get to them.
It may not apply to Burlington, but have you heard anything at all about rural access to air? Like, for example, in Rutland, we have, what's it called, Cape Air. They rely on a federal subsidy to service a rural area to operate that. Have you, and maybe it wouldn't go through your shop, but any indication that rural air subsidies might be in danger?
It's not something I'm familiar with, but I don't work very closely with the aviation program in particular on that aspect, but
All right, thank you.
you're welcome. So Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and our Northern Border Regional Commission, these are the two next ones that we have. So I have one correction to this slide, which I believe you'll be receiving a full worksheet of all of these in detail, and you'll see that update reflected on the worksheet you'll be receiving. The first line of Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program is actually a formula program. So this is both competitive and formula. There is formula appropriated through it's called MCSAP, Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. And then the second line with high priority activities, grants, and cooperative agreements, that one actually is a competitive program. These funds have been received, they're budgeted for, and they are not at risk. The same is true with the Northern Borders Grant. The monies here were grants that were applied for in 2021 and received in 21 and 22. Funds are not at risk and the projects are moving forward.
So that you received money 5 years ago that you're still spending down, is that?
Yes.
And is that how it usually works, is you get a lump sum and you have an X number of years to spend
It
it?
depends on how long we receive the money, and then there's usually a period of performance associated with the grant. These two, the one was for the Northeast Kingdom Airport Terminal Project, and the other was a rail intermodal development project that were both received. So it could take some time for them to get worked into the capital program as well.
Okay. I didn't know Northern Borders Regional Commission did this stuff. Did you do that?
Yeah, and that Northern Borders, they are providing grants. They provided grants for different things to outside organizations, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we have not applied for anything in the recent years. So these were our last two recent projects.
Do you get a set amount of money for that, or is it based upon the grants that you have applications for?
It's specific applications and it is competitive. You're welcome. So a couple of other funding sources. These funding sources are either obtained through statute and excess receipts, or for federal fund sources, which may or may not be utilized in a given year, or new federal fund sources, which are obtained throughout the course of fiscal 25. So we have a pass-through that comes through Finance and Administration from the Department of the Interior and goes to another state agency. The TSA, I'm sorry, I skipped the first line. The TSA, Transportation Security Administration, and that was money that we received for the Rutland Regional Airport, and we paid for the TSA services, but that arrangement has changed, so we no longer receive the monies, and the airport is working, I believe, directly with TSA on that, but either way, it's not a responsibility of ours any further. It's just still listed as something for fiscal 25. And then the other two are little monies that come into DMV through one of the mechanisms listed. So lastly, I think folks have probably heard of the NEVI program, or National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. This is an area that is currently on hold, but that we have I should say, we have not withdrawn funds from this program. So we, other than the NEVI program, we have not placed any projects on hold. The NEVI program is currently under review. US DOT, Department of Transportation, Secretary Duffy advised on April 2nd, when he was testifying in front of Senate EPW, that once the new programmatic guidance is released, so he withdrew the programmatic guidance, canceled the state plans. And once the new programmatic guidance is released, that states may update their NEVI plans and funding may still advance. So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit about what he said. NEVI was appropriated by Congress, so DOT will implement the law. However, the department is rewriting the guidance because under previous guidance, only 66 chargers were installed from the $5 billion of the pot of funding that was set aside for charging stations. I would like to note, outside of my paraphrasing, that Vermont has one of them, which is in Bradford. He also stated that he or his agency will look at the guidance and make the guidance work. He will do what Congress directed. So these funds are on hold at the moment. You'll see that on the slide, the first 3 projects, Bradford is operational and did use the NEVI funds. Randolph and Wilmington, we had a set aside in ARPA monies that were converted to general fund, and we've advanced those. Randolph and Wilmington, we're advancing fully with general fund. And then the remainder of them are on hold right now until we understand what the new guidance looks like from the NEVI program, and we have a chance to update our state plan. So we have not received anything saying that is not happening. So it's just, it's an uncertain time on when we'll be able to continue advancing this work.
There's a few of us here who looking at our town saying, we hope it gets off hold. Several of us, yes, okay.
So that's all I have to share today. It's really great news, for the Agency of Transportation, that we don't seem to have really anything at risk at this point, with the exception of the uncertainty of knowing when we'll be able to advance NEVI.
Jim and then Tom.
Yeah, so could you just go back on the NEVI program? It's on hold because, not because it's in danger necessarily, but the rules are being rewritten. Because, did you say 66 million for, what was the number you used for a limited number of charging stations?
The Secretary of the Department of Transportation, Secretary Duffy, stated that only 66 chargers had been installed from the $5 billion that were set aside for charging stations.
5 million.
Billion.
But we haven't spent the 5 billion.
Right.
That's
No,
that's not all our money.
Okay, got it.
And so,
We just receive a small portion of that.
but it's sort of.
It's the total for the NEVI program. Yeah.
Just
Okay.
assuming they haven't spent the 4.8 billion.
Right, there's there's a little bit left.
Yeah, Tom?
You said that the IIJA program, the infrastructure program that was started a couple of years ago, is safe?
Yeah, it's a
Funding for that is-
core highway program. So every 5 years, there's a reauthorization of the federal highway program and all of the other modal programs. And previously it was called the FAST Act. This one is called the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. And in 2026, October 1, there will be a new act. And we don't know what it's going to be called, but it will cover the next 5 years.
And so the recent reports that paving will be down this year because there's a drop in the state match or whatever it is, has nothing to do with the drop in any, well, you're not getting a drop in federal funds.
We're not
So
receiving a drop in federal funds, no.
thanks.
Yeah, I was under the impression that the IIJA was good for several years, like to 27, 28.
It's a 5-year window of authorization, and then we have a 3-year window after the last. So every rolling year, the
Yeah.
first year we have 3 years, we obligate and then we spend. So we have time to implement those projects. So we will still be technically using IIJA monies into years beyond 26, but they will have been for projects and work that was obligated and committed to in the 22 to 2026 window.
So that goes to what, 29, 28?
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Nice to have a positive one.
Yes, thank you for being more optimistic.
We appreciate it. It gets a little grim here sometimes, so we're happy to have some good news. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. Committee, let's see now. Oh, Erin has made a big copy of spreadsheet social handling. We are done for the morning. We have the floor one, and then we have Department of Labor coming in at 2:00. And then at 3:00 are the libraries. And then 3:30 is the Center for Crime Victim Services. So that's what is on our afternoon. The floor, we hope won't be too long, but one never knows. There's not much.
Is there any chance either of those fire afternoons can come in at 11 o'clock?
Oh.
It's over.
Erin, I don't know if you heard Jim. Was there any chance that either the 3 or 3:30 could come in
You know.
this morning, like at 11 or something? No.
Be that way.
If we learn of anything
They're
that
probably
suddenly is
busy
able
people.
to
They
show
come
up,
out wrong.
They kind of sort of did, yeah.
yeah. You will get a text from Erin or me if we have any change in the morning schedule.